and welcome to the Rational Fans podcast. That is Rational Fans with a Z. We're here on this Thanksgiving week. I'm Mason Gray, and my only partner today is Evan Kruger.
What's happening?
We got a lot of travel plans going on with the staff, so it'll just be the two of us. So, Evan, the Golden State Warriors, they're just absolutely dominating. 16-0, 111-77 against the Lakers. What the heck?
Let's analyze what happened against the Lakers. You know, the best player for the Warriors against the Lakers was obviously Kobe Bryant. He went like 5 for 35 or something like that. And, you know, he just looked really old. He looked like Peyton Manning out there playing basketball. And, you know, the Warriors, I mean, they're just on an upward trajectory that nobody saw coming before the season started. I mean, everybody was kind of enamored with the Spurs and their massive front court, but now you're seeing just how dominant a small ball team can be, just how much the game has really changed, because right now it's all centered around guards that can shoot the three from 35 feet, and then a big man these days is a 6'8" point forward like a LeBron James or a Kevin Durant that can handle the ball and shoot threes, and that's what the league has become, and that's a style of play that the Warriors are really good at.
You know, Warriors are just shooting the three lights out this year, so you got to wonder, can they keep up that ridiculous pace of shooting the three? And if they don't, they're obviously going to drop somewhere to where they lose more games.
Well, you know what they say. I mean, you live by the three and you die by the three. But, you know, I think that the way that the Warriors play, yeah, they shoot a lot of threes, but it's team-oriented basketball. And you saw last year in the finals that when one thing wasn't working for them, they were able to switch gears. They were able to play different styles against the Cavaliers, and that's why they won the championship. And it's just the ball movement, it's unlike we've really never seen before. I mean, this is team basketball at its finest. I mean, of course, you got your superstar in Steph Curry, but you also have pieces like Draymond Green, like Andre Iguodala, that can go off at any moment, that can play defense, and that's formula for a championship.
No, last week, SportsCenter had their 72-win Bulls versus this year's Golden State Warriors. I don't think I caught who won, but that'd be an interesting debate because the 72-win Bulls have a lot more size, and I wouldn't say athleticism, but they're a lot more size, and they have more. I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say. I don't even know what I'm trying to say, really.
Well, I think that when you would match up the 72-win Bulls and this year's Warriors, it's not necessarily a matchup of who's more talented, because both teams are or were immensely talented. It's more a matchup of different styles of play and which one is superior, and that's a question that we can't really settle. And so, you know, it's interesting to speculate about, but of course we'll never know who would actually win.
The word I was looking for was physical.
Physical.
Because they had Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan. I mean, I'm sure they would throw the ball in the paint, and Dennis Rodman and Scottie Pippen would just elbow their way through the paint and get an easy bucket.
Well, like guys like Draymond Green and Andre Iguodala, they're scrappy players too, and so it's not like we can automatically chalk it up as being, you know, the Warriors would be, you know, they would be out muscled in the paint, but then they would make up for it shooting threes from 40 feet. I don't necessarily think that's how it would go, because, you know, they do have a little bit of size. You talk about Andrew Bogut, you know, they do have big men that can at least complement their guards.
You know, the 76ers on the opposite side of things, they haven't won a game yet. I think they're 0-15 or 0-16. They're just so bad.
History is being made. We could possibly see the best and the worst start to a season, you know, that we've ever seen. And it's just funny to see the contrast. A team that's surrounded by so much, you know, they're just surrounded by stardom, and the sky's the limit to what the Warriors can do. And, you know, you got to wonder, those 76ers just keep bottoming out. And it's a question of how low can you go before you start getting better. You know, you would think that, you know, like 3 years ago, the Warriors 76ers would have been, all right, now they're really in the dumps. Now they're the worst that they're ever going to be. And they just keep getting worse. And I have no idea, because they had like that terrible Andrew Bynum trade where they gave up it was a terrible deal for him, and he ended up sitting out the entire year. Draft Nerlens Noel, he sits out the entire year. You know, trade away Michael Carter-Williams, and it seems like it's a dumpster fire. It reminds me of the Cleveland Browns, really.
You know, you got to wonder when Sam Hinkie is going to get fired. Seems like every year he's like, Let's trade away our youngest piece that we have, who could be our potential superstar, for 3 more draft picks next year. He's doing that every single year.
You know, you got to at least let things pan out. I mean, if it doesn't work right away, you got to stick with it. I mean, but, you know, the 76ers, it's such a poorly run organization that you just never know what you're going to get with their draft picks, because it seems like every player they touch turns to a pile of dog crap.
You know, Duke fans have started a free Jahlil Okafor petition because Jahlil Okafor is so good, but he's just stuck in a terrible franchise.
He'll get out eventually. They always do.
Jahlil Okafor this season is probably one of the favorites for Rookie of the Year. Maybe Kristaps Porzingis is right up there. While we're on Kristaps Porzingis, what is he, like 6'7"?
Yeah, he's something like that.
The 6'7", the kid from Latvia. Nobody knew what to expect. Knicks took him with the 4th overall pick. Knicks fans are like, oh, we don't know about this kid. Well, he sucks. We don't want him. And now Carmelo Anthony is saying he's going to lead this Knicks team once I'm long gone. Like, that's a great thing to hear from a superstar in Carmelo Anthony.
It's just been amazing what Kristaps Porzingis has been able to accomplish. He's gone from complete and absolute obscurity to being at the forefront of a New York sports franchise, which isn't easy to do. I mean, New York sports fans, they're not easy to please. And you know, I heard at one of their games, I think it was last week when they won, and the crowd was chanting Kristaps. No, actually Porzingis. And you know, he's playing great, but is it already time to crown him as the next superstar? Because granted, they're like 8-8 now, which, you know, that's not really playoff bound, except for the fact that they're in the Eastern Conference.
You know, those same fans that were chanting Porzingis, I've heard him call him Porzingod too. Like, those same fans were wanting the GM of the New York Knicks. They were wanting to fire him right on the spot when they drafted Porzingis because he was from Latvia and nobody knew what to expect.
Didn't they have a website dedicated to firing the New York Knicks GM?
I'm pretty sure they did. Nobody knew what to expect there. You know, looking at the NBA draft, Ben Simmons is probably the clear number 1 for this upcoming draft. Freshman out of LSU. Last night he had a double-double, only scoring 2 points. And he's always getting 20 rebounds, 10 assists, and 20 points. It's ridiculous, some of the stats that he puts up night in and night out.
You know, it seems like nowadays the number 1 NBA draft prospects, they're never the redshirt juniors or the seniors like the Frank Kaminsky's. It's always the high school seniors that people are saying, all right, after he makes his brief stop in college, then he's going to be the number 1 pick. And that's always how it works out. And that's just the reality of today's basketball world. I mean, of course, we could sit here and debate, you know, one and dones in college basketball, but I think it's great if you have the talent to be able to go and play in the NBA. I've always been an advocate saying, you know, if you have the ability to do that, then why not let them? Why make them go play in college? He's already NBA ready, it looks like. He already has the talent. You know, maybe he can, you know, polish up some of his some parts of his game. But right now, he looks like the clear-cut, you know, first-round draft pick, and not the run-of-the-mill first-round draft pick that, you know, gets drafted and then fades into obscurity. He looks like a guy that can actually make a difference in the NBA.
So some of his stat lines are just crazy, and he's doing it against good teams. It's not like he's doing it against these lower Division I teams like your Southeastern State or whatever you want to call them. He did this in a tournament with 3 other all-right teams. It's just amazing what Ben Simmons is doing.
You know, I think Ben Simmons really, let's switch to college basketball. I think he's really the only reason that LSU is relevant at this point. I can't name another guy from LSU's roster. He is LSU. I mean, last year, LSU, a 16-win team. And then this year, people are talking, you know, they're a surefire Sweet 16 team. And, you know, on that note, they did lose the other night, and it seems like all of the best teams are losing. North Carolina's lost. Indiana lost to Wake Forest. It just seems like upset after upset. At the beginning of the year, I was thinking, oh, man, these are really cool. But now it's just getting annoying. It's like, come on, top teams. Can you win a game against a low-quality opponent?
This year, it's early in the year, so I'm not. It's not. This is not saying much, but I don't see the top dominant team that you see most of the years. Last year it was Kentucky, and over the years there's been one dominant team. They're like, oh, they'll make it to the Final Four at least, and if not, then they had a bad season. I could see anybody in the Final Four. Any team in the top 25, and even there's a couple teams outside the top 25 easily make the Final Four, and nobody would be surprised.
I mean, we can sit off here. We can pretty much pick anybody in the top 25 right now and say, they're going to make the Final Four. I mean, UNC, Duke, Kentucky, Maryland, maybe even Indiana, Purdue. I mean, any of these teams, they have a shot at going to the Final Four, and that's what I think this is going to be one of the most exciting years we've had in college basketball in a long time.
Notre Dame, Michigan State, Villanova, Wichita State, Gonzaga.
Vanderbilt. Even Vanderbilt's looking good.
6 more teams right there to add to the mix of what's already 10. And it's just crazy because, first, I think this could be the year we see a 1 seed lose to a 16 seed.
Maybe. That's always hard to tell because, we don't really get to see a whole lot of these mid-majors. And, it's like the MEAC conference champion at the 16 seed playing the 1 seed, and we really don't know anything about them.
They always have horrible schedules, and most of the time they get on a lucky run at the end of their conference tournament, but that lucky run could carry over into the national tournament. And if you have 4 iffy teams on the 1 seed and any of them loses, that'd just be history right there.
One automatically thinks of Florida Gulf Coast a few years ago. They beat Duke. Yeah, they beat Duke, made it to the Sweet 16. And I didn't even know Florida Gulf Coast was at college. I would have thought Division III probably, if anything.
That year though, Miami was also a 2 seed in the same division, in the same region as Indiana. But that same Florida Gulf Coast team beat Miami earlier in the season. So it was obviously a surprise for everybody to see a 15 seed in the Sweet 16. But a win over Miami was a big reason as to why they stayed on the 15 line and not the 16 line. Had they been on the 16 line, we could have seen history. Indiana.
All right, let's talk about Indiana because, they left their defense in Bloomington when they went to Maui. I mean, watching them play Wake Forest, they just had so many opportunities. Like, they were up by 9 with, I think it was 3 minutes left. Wake Forest ended up on, a 19-6 run. Indiana had the ball with a minute left, and they were up 78-77. They have an opportunity to at least make it a game where even if Wake Forest hits a 3 or something like that, then they can at least have another shot at winning it. But then they throw up a terrible shot and they go down to the other end and they give up such a wide open layup, and you're left thinking, how is this a team that we saw just obliterate a very talented Creighton team, and now they can't beat Wake Forest? And it seems like their defense let them down, and that's going to be the theme throughout the year in all of Indiana's losses. Their defense let them down.
Wake Forest was projected to finish dead last in the ACC. I'm sure that's not going to happen anymore. That Wake Forest team kind of looked dangerous, but I'm sure they'll be middle of the pack, maybe lower pack in the ACC. If you're going to lose to teams like that, and that's kind of scary if you're IU.
We see it all the time. Indiana, like last year, they beat Maryland once, or then they would lose to Penn State, and you never know what you're going to get, especially when they're not in Assembly Hall. If they're not in Assembly Hall, then it's a safe bet to think that the Hoosiers are going to lose. But when they're at home, it's hard to beat them.
Tom Crean is obviously on the hot seat. What do you think Tom Crean has to do this season to stay off the hot seat and or not get fired?
To not get fired, obviously, he needs to make it to the tournament. If they make it to the NCAA tournament, then he won't be fired. But to get off of the hot seat, they have to get past the Sweet 16. I mean, that's something they couldn't do even when they had Jordan Holes and Cody Zeller, Christian Watford, Verdell Jones. They could never make it past the Sweet 16. They would always lose to a Syracuse team or something like that because they could just never, ever seem to make it past the Sweet 16. And that's something that Tom Crean has to show the Indiana basketball program that he can do if he wants to become a more respected coach. Because right now, a lot of the talk is, as long as we have Tom Crean as our coach, we're never going to go far. And I think that's a shame. I think he's a good coach. It's unfortunate, the matchups that they've gotten in the tournament.
I think that's about what I would have said. And you have to make it past the Sweet 16, then stay off the hot seat and make it to the tournament to not get fired there. So on to the college football playoff rankings. We have Clemson, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Iowa, with Michigan State jumping Notre Dame for 5 and Notre Dame rounding out the top 6. Let's play a little what needs to happen for this team to make the tournament. I've got 4 teams here, and I'm going to list them off, and you need to tell me what needs to happen for this team to make the playoffs. So Florida, what do they need to do to make the playoffs?
Florida has to beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. Florida, even if they do beat Alabama, they're still not a complete lock. They have to. There's no possible world in which Florida doesn't win the SEC championship game and they do make it to the college football playoffs. That is the only way that could happen. And I don't see there's any way that could happen, because the way they played Saturday, they just looked terrible. It's like they forgot their offense, and it's just, I don't know. Florida doesn't look like a team that's going to do any damage at all against Alabama.
The Florida offense is what's really killing them this season. With Will Grier gone for the season on that PED suspension, their offense has looked really bad at times, and their defense is what has kept them in most of their ball games. So if they want to do anything, especially against Alabama's really tough defense, if they want to do anything, they got to pick up their offense.
Well, they needed overtime to beat Florida Atlantic 20-14 last week, and so there's no way they're going to beat Alabama.
So North Carolina, what do they need to do?
Okay, North Carolina, it's a team that they have one loss, and it was like their second game of the season. That was to South Carolina, and nobody's really talking about them. They haven't lost in the ACC. They're going to play Clemson in the ACC championship game, and if they beat Clemson, if that happens, if they can do that, then there's a good shot that they might get in, because they've been overlooked all year, and so they might be overlooked again. But North Carolina right now, they're 14th. And if they can beat Clemson, the number 1 team, they might shoot up to 4th conceivably, but that's going to be difficult depending on whatever else happens in college football.
In college football, you have a lot of one-loss teams, and a lot of times it comes down to who did you lose to. And for North Carolina, they lost to South Carolina. That was probably one of the worst losses that you can possibly have.
Well, there's a lot of teams right now in the top 12, which I think really right now, if you're not in the top 12 or North Carolina, there's no shot for you to make it to the college football playoff. But right now in the top 12, there are a lot of teams with ugly warts, especially Oklahoma. They lost to Texas, but you just saw the college football committee, the playoff committee, put them all the way up to number 3. And so if even Oklahoma can be number 3 right now with a loss to, of all people, Texas, then I don't think that a loss to South Carolina for North Carolina should keep them out of the college football playoff.
Michigan State lost to Nebraska. That's an ugly loss right there. Stanford lost to Northwestern. That didn't look so ugly at the beginning, but it's kind of getting uglier and uglier as the season goes on.
Yeah.
Third team, Ohio State. What do they need to do?
Ohio State, they need a lot of help to get to the Big Ten championship. I think the Big Ten champion is going to get into the top 4. And so any Big Ten team, Iowa, Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, what they have to do is win the Big Ten championship. That's the ultimate goal for them. If they non-Big Ten champion, even a one-loss team that's not a Big Ten champion from the Big Ten, is not going to make the top 4.
I think the ultimate doom for the Big Ten would be having Michigan win the Big Ten and have Michigan winning the Big Ten title. They have 2 losses on the season to Michigan State and Utah. So I think if Michigan wins the whole thing, Big Ten's out of the playoffs.
that's the only way the Big Ten is out of the playoffs in my book. And it's a long shot for Michigan to make it to the Big Ten championship right now, really.
I'm not sure what Ohio State has to have to make it to the.
All right, so let's think about this. They need a Michigan State loss this week, and they need to beat Michigan. And then and only then can they be in the...
Okay.
You know.
Because then Michigan would have 2 losses, Michigan State would have 2 losses, and Ohio State would have... Okay.
Right now, Michigan State is in the driver's seat because they have the tiebreaker over Ohio State and Michigan. So unless they lose this week, they're going to be playing Iowa.
Michigan State plays Penn State this weekend. And with Christian Hackenberg, you don't really know what to expect with Penn State. I mean, sometimes their offense looks really pedestrian. Other times they're kind of good. So, I mean, if they can turn it on against Michigan State, and who knows if Michigan State has Connor Cook, or if they don't, and if they have to go to their second and third string quarterback, could be a potential upset there.
I watched Michigan play Penn State this weekend, and Penn State's offensive line is so bad that I don't think there's any way that they could beat Michigan. They've given up like 44 sacks or something like that this season. I mean, they've just been absolutely porous, and there's nothing that you can do when you're Christian Hackenberg when you're getting hit all the time. And so it's no wonder that Penn State hasn't been better than they have been.
So you think the winner of the Big Ten, whether it be Iowa, Michigan State, or Ohio State, is a lock for the playoffs?
Yes.
So if Michigan wins, it's over for the Big Ten?
Possibly. Most likely. But again, with any of these situations, it depends on whatever else happens in college football.
So my fourth team for what if is Stanford.
2-loss teams, it's almost inconceivable how any 2-loss team could get in. Stanford, even as a Pac-12 champion, I don't see the committee making them any higher than 5th. They might be in 5th. They might put them in 5th just as a consolation prize, but nobody wants to be ranked 5th at the end of the year. But Stanford, even if they win out, even if they're Pac-12 champions, I don't see the committee putting in any 2-loss team unless they absolutely have to, unless there were 3 1-loss teams. There were only 3 1-loss teams or undefeated teams, and they had to put in a 2-loss team. Other than that, I don't see any way Stanford gets in.
But Stanford has passed the eye test as of late. Christian McCaffrey has put up Heisman-type numbers. And in the Big Ten championship, you'll have Iowa and the winner of the other side of the Big Ten, whether it be Michigan State or Ohio State. And that's going to knock one of them out of the top 10, moving Stanford up. If they can beat Notre Dame, that moves Stanford up another spot to 7th. Florida, Bama, move them up again. A lot of these top 10 teams still have to play each other, whether it be in their conference title games or in rivalry week here to this coming week. So a lot of things could happen for Stanford to move right up there.
Nothing is set. At this point, I think that for Clemson, Alabama, Oklahoma, Iowa, and Michigan State, their destiny is in their own hands. Because if Clemson wins out, they're in. If Alabama wins out, they're in. If Oklahoma wins out, they're in. And Iowa, they're going to be playing for the Big Ten championship. So if they win this week and they win the Big Ten championship, they're in. If Michigan State can get the job done, they'll be playing Iowa. And if they can beat Iowa, then they're in. All the other teams, whether they get in or not, is completely dependent on how those top 5 teams can, how they perform in the next 2 weeks.
So if we have Clemson, Bama, Oklahoma win out, and both Big Ten teams win out, winner of the Big Ten gets the 4th spot, you don't see any way that Notre Dame gets in?
No. A win over Stanford would look nice, but, the way that they performed against Boston College, that really, really hurt them, because Boston College is not a good team by any measure, and they won 19-16, and that really hurt them. I mean, they dropped all the way down to 6th. I mean, even Michigan State was ahead of them this week, and so Notre Dame, even if they win out, they don't have a conference championship game, so they won't have that final chance to impress people, and then they will probably get left out in the end.
Oklahoma doesn't have that same conference championship game either, so it'd be interesting to see there. FPI, very, very interesting way to rank the teams. I have no idea how much it's taken into account with the College Football Playoff Committee, But with FPI, Oklahoma would be one. Ohio State would be in there. Baylor would be in there. And I forget who the fourth team is.
Number 4 right now, we've got Oklahoma at number 1, Baylor at number 2, Alabama number 3, Ohio State number 4 in Football Power Index.
So it's really a strong indicator of strength of schedule, really, because Clemson only one big win over Notre Dame. Iowa, they're tied for 28th in the Football Power Index. They're like 2 spots ahead of Auburn out of all teams. Like, I don't know if Football Power Index is a good ranking at all. But.
Well, that's more of a measure of where the team is at right now, not necessarily where it's been the entire season. It's another interesting thing to look at right now is the win-out percentage. That's based for ESPN. That's based on the ESPN Football Power Index. And right now, the team that has the best chance to win out and thus make the college football playoff is Oklahoma at 67.3%. Because if they win this week, then I don't see them getting kicked out by the committee after the regular season's over.
They only have that one game, so that's a big boost to their winning percentage. And Iowa has a 19% chance to win out this season. Who do they play this week?
They don't play anyone very good. And then, of course, they have...
Then the Big Ten Championship.
They're going to get Michigan State, Michigan, or Ohio State. And right now, I don't think that the ESPN has any confidence in Iowa playing against any of those teams because, obviously, 18.3%, that's not very high.
Bama this week, they play Auburn. Auburn fan, I'm really hoping that Auburn pulls the upset of Bama, knocks Bama out of the playoffs.
That would be awesome to see because of my intense hatred for the SEC. But the thing is that, you can say, okay, it's rivalry week. You never know what's going to happen. But as bad as Auburn's been this year, they have absolutely no shot at beating Alabama. I don't think there's any way that they can. Alabama, they look like the most talented team in football right now, and Auburn does not. And so I don't think that there's any way that Auburn's going to even put up a challenge to Alabama.
The only thing that I can hope for is the thing called rivalry week, and that anything can happen in college football scenario. And Auburn becomes 7-5, win their bowl game. They have the same record that they did last year as when Auburn was a playoff team was in what seemed like a lock 10 weeks through the season.
Well, you can say you never know what's going to happen, but sometimes you do know what's going to happen. On the flip side of that, probabilities, they're important to look at, but none of that really matters once the teams step onto the field. Conceivably, anything can happen, but, the way Alabama's playing right now, I don't think that Auburn's going to beat them.
I think you're right on that one, really. So Les Miles is going to get bought out by the LSU boosters and LSU school. Who do you think could possibly replace Les Miles in LSU, along with the vast majority of so many good college football coaching jobs open?
I don't think that they're going to get a better coach than Les Miles in there, honestly, because a lot of teams, it's a knee-jerk reaction. We're going to fire our coach. But the coach isn't always the problem. Firing your coach will only get you so far. A lot of it is talent on the field for LSU. Leonard Fournette has disappeared. They've generated nothing from the passing game, and their defense has been absolutely atrocious. And I don't know if firing Les Miles is the answer. They're going to. And whoever they bring in, he's not going to be as great of a coach as Les Miles has been because he has a lot of experience. They talked about Jimbo Fisher, I believe, coming in. Former Florida State coach, and trying to go from one legendary coach in Les Miles to another, and I don't think that's going to fix their problems.
There's so many good college coaching positions open this season. I don't think I've ever seen this many good positions open. USC is going to be open. LSU is going to be open. Texas might be open. And although Nick Saban says he's going to stay, so there's so many enticing offers for Nick Saban to leave Alabama.
There's even talk that Jim Irsay wants to hire Nick Saban, and he's going to do whatever he can to get Nick Saban in there. Texas, they want to go all in for Nick Saban, which I don't see why Nick Saban would go to Texas anyways. But, there's a high demand for Nick Saban. Nick Saban, he could possibly go to the NFL. There's talk every year about Nick Saban going to the NFL. I mean, you remember when he was the coach of the Dolphins, he was an awful head coach. And so I think he'll stay in college where he belongs, and he's probably going to stay at Alabama.
Even Virginia Tech, I mean, that it's not as high profile as the other ones that we just listed, but I mean, it's still a pretty big coaching job to be open just for no reason, really.
Yeah.
But Chip Kelly in the NFL, there's talks he could move back to the NCAA, but, Eagles fans would just be absolutely upset because Chip Kelly runs their team into the ground, saying he knows what he's doing, he's building his own team, and then he just leaves for the NCAA.
I think this is a good caveat to our NFL discussion because let's talk about what we saw Eagles versus Buccaneers because that was an impressive game for the Buccaneers, not so much for the Eagles. You saw two teams on two different trajectories. You saw in the Buccaneers a team that's buying into the system, that's buying into what Lovie Smith is doing, that's buying into the team. They're all in on the Buccaneers, and they've gone from just a 2-win team from last year to a team with somebody at quarterback, Jameis Winston, who started out, we thought, oh, he's terrible. We saw his first game. But then he goes and he throws 5 touchdowns against the Eagles, and he made some really impressive throws. And then you look on the flip side, and you see a team and the Eagles that doesn't believe in what Chip Kelly's doing, that hasn't bought into the system. You see a quarterback in Mark Sanchez who's, no better or no worse than Sam Bradford. They're both terrible quarterbacks that just is completely inept. And a fan base that is just tired of all of this nonsense. Chip Kelly's going to lose his job, and rightfully so, because his system obviously doesn't work in the NFL, and I think he will go back to college football.
If you're Chip Kelly, I think you want to win at the NFL level because you came in, ruined this team, and everybody's saying fire him. But once you fire him, Chip Kelly is feeling like, I did something wrong, I need to correct this.
Well, who's going to hire him? Who wants that to happen to their team? I mean, wherever he goes, he's going to want complete control of the system. He's going to want to put in the Chip Kelly offense, the Chip Kelly defense. He's going to want to run it his way, and his way hasn't worked. And who's going to want to subject their team to that? I can't think of anybody, no matter how bad. Even the Cleveland Browns wouldn't want that to happen.
Maybe the Titans could. I mean, Titans are bad, and they have Marcus Mariota, who knows Chip Kelly's system. So maybe Chip Kelly could come in there, coach Marcus Mariota up in that offense, and that offense could look all right.
Maybe. That's the only team that I can see wanting Chip Kelly to coach them, and solely for the reason that Marcus Mariota is their quarterback.
You spoke of the Cleveland Browns. Johnny Manziel goes from the starting quarterback the rest of the season to the third-string quarterback on his bye week. What are you doing, Johnny Manziel?
The Johnny football persona, it served Johnny Manziel really well in that he's become one of the better-known quarterbacks that we've seen. But it's also hurt him so much because he's been caught up so much into the life of Johnny football that he's forgotten to actually play football. Because mind you, he's never really produced on the field. He had that one game where he threw for 389 yards in garbage time, and so they named him the starter thinking, what the heck, we drafted him, we might as well run him into the ground before we cut him. But then he goes and he runs himself into the ground. And it's just, he spent 10 months in rehab last year. He spent all offseason rehab. And, you think, what's it going to take for Johnny Manziel to finally become the quarterback that he was expected to be coming out of Texas A&M? And, he's not doing himself any favors at this point.
Mike Pettin, you got to wonder if the benching of Johnny Manziel, if Pettin really wanted to bench him, but he had no reason. So he's now using this whole situation as a scapegoat to bench Johnny Manziel because he hasn't performed. Like, Johnny Manziel did this, let's bench him, and the media won't care because that's what Johnny Manziel does.
Well, it's funny. He's not even their backup. He's their third string, and that's what's kind of funny. I don't want to say funny, but kind of it's funny about the situation that on the bye week. It's nothing he did on the field. It's just that he's that dumb to get himself demoted 2 spots on the roster to the completely useless third-string quarterback. Johnny Manziel has been such a disappointment for Cleveland Browns fans. I'd say they deserve better, but the Browns, they don't expect anything else from their team. It's a sad dumpster fire out in Cleveland right now.
Who is the third string quarterback now behind Josh McCown? I don't even think
the backup.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Like, we can't even name the backup quarterback, but whoever old no name is still ahead of Johnny Manziel on the Cleveland Browns roster.
NFL injuries, they happen every season, but I don't think I've ever seen them at such a ridiculous pace like we have this season. So many big-name running backs, quarterbacks, just about everybody's went down this season, and it's made a big impact on how the game is played, really.
As a fan of a team that has been bitten by the injury bug a lot as a fan of the Indianapolis Colts, I know how much it sucks to see your prized quarterback or your best cornerback go down to an injury, and you just think, why does it have to be us? I mean, you look around at the league, and when it's happening to other teams, you think, oh, that's too bad. But when it happens to your team, then, wow, that really sucks, because the quality of play for your team as well as the rest of the NFL goes down a whole lot. I've read articles saying that this year's NFL might have the worst play quality of all time because for 2 reasons, actually 3. The first one, as you mentioned, is the injury. The injury bug has bitten everybody. Tony Romo, Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck, Drew Brees was injured. Everybody's been injured. Jordy Nelson went down. You saw tons of knee injuries even before the season started. Le'Veon Bell's out. And so these teams are scrambling to put together a respectable offense. The second reason is terrible officiating. The officiating this year has been absolutely laughable. I can think of at least 3 circumstances that have really just been super controversial that have cost one team the game and given another team a win they weren't supposed to have. You think of when the Seahawks beat the Lions on that fumble that was pushed out of bounds. You had the controversy at the end of the Patriots-Bills game. You had the botched false start against the with Jaguars versus Ravens, and it's 50-year-old men trying to keep up with the best athletes in the world, and they just can't. And the officiating, it's been bad in the past, but now it's laughably bad.
That was going to be a completely different segment, so let's kind of steer back to the NFL injury bug, and then we can rant about the refs, because I really want to rant about the refs. They're just so bad.
I have one more reason why the NFL this year has been so bad, and that is the running back. Okay, before the season started, it was kind of the buzz that the running back position, it's kind of on the way out. It's not as important as it used to be. But then we see that when teams have bad running backs, they can't control the game, and so their offense just look completely out of sync. That's the reason why the Vikings have been good this year and other teams haven't, is because the quality of play at running back has just gone completely downhill, and we don't really see very many dominant running backs.
The Ravens were probably hit by the injury bug the hardest this week, losing Justin Forsett and Joe Flacco both for the season. Now Ravens bring in 80-year-old Matt Schaub. I'm not sure if he was on their roster or if they just picked him up, but he's still 80 years old, and he's leading this 2-8 Ravens team, or are they 3-7?
I think they're 2-8.
They're leading this 2-8 Ravens team on a already bad season. He's just going to lead them farther down the toilet to possibly the number 1 pick, and that's all coming from a projected playoff team to the number 1 pick.
It's surprising to see what's happened to the Ravens this year. It wasn't just the injuries; they were playing bad before everybody got hurt, before even Steve Smith got hurt. They're a perennial playoff team that haven't been this bad in years. I mean, they're a team that's always in the wild card hunt, always playing the Patriots in the divisional round. And now you see just how bad that they can be. and you're going to get a complete reshuffling of the team in the offseason. They really have to rethink their strategies on offense and defense.
Let's just go through a list of some of the bigger names that have went down with injuries. You got Keenan Allen, Steve Smith, Matt Forte, Jamal Charles, Le'Veon Bell, Joe Flacco, Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, Big Ben. It's just a list of the many, many NFL players who have went down. It's just crazy that this is probably the most injured players I've ever seen in one season.
You know, it's almost unprecedented. It's not something that you can prepare for, and it's not really something that's a result of anything else. Injuries are always freak accidents, and it's just so happened that more freak accidents have happened this year than we've ever seen.
You know, the Patriots and Panthers. Patriots are starting to become one of the NFL's more depleted teams, losing Deion Lewis, Julian Edelman. But then the Panthers on the opposite end, they're about as healthy as you can be right now. I don't think they've missed a key player really the past couple weeks due to injury.
Really, they're not even missing Kelvin Benjamin. They've managed to fill. Greg Olson's really managed to fill his spot quite nicely.
You know, Devin Funchess this year has done a great job, especially these past couple games, of filling in for Kelvin Benjamin. Kelvin Benjamin and Devin Funchess next season, having Cam throw to them, that could be deadly. They're both 6'3", 6'4" receivers, and Cam always throws it up extremely high for some reason. Having both of them on opposite sides of the field along with Greg Olson, Panthers could have one of the better passing attacks in the league next season.
Another reason the Panthers have been this good is like what I said about the running backs. They have a good running back in Jonathan Stewart. So they've been able to control the pace of games, and thus they've been able to avoid the terrible quality of play that's bitten every team from the Packers to the Colts. That, you know, they've been able to run the ball, which is something we really haven't seen a whole lot of this year.
You know, NFL fans can say all they want about how the Panthers' defense is carrying them to a 10-0 record. But the Panthers' offense is third in the NFL in scoring behind the Patriots and Cardinals. Other than those two teams, nobody has scored more points this season than Carolina Panthers.
You know, that's because Cam Newton's playing like an MVP. I mean, you had Jameis Winston throw for 5 touchdowns Saturday, and Cam Newton, not to be outplayed, he also threw for 5 touchdowns, and he just made some ridiculous throws, like the arm strength that he has and the accuracy that he has. He's finally looking like the quarterback that we saw really in his first season, kind of disappeared there for a couple years, and now he's really back in full force, playing like a surefire MVP candidate.
You know, who would be your MVP today? Tom Brady or Cam Newton?
I would have to say Tom Brady, because Cam Newton, he hasn't always been, he's not at all times the most important part of the Panthers offense. But, you know, Tom Brady, he's had to carry the Patriots this year. Sometimes that's been by design. Sometimes that hasn't been, because their running game has really been up and down for the Patriots. LeGarrette Blount, he had like 56 yards against the Bills on Monday. And Tom Brady, he's really been the one carrying that team. So I'd have to give the edge to Tom Brady at this point.
You know, a Panthers fan, I can't go against Cam Newton.
Yeah, of course.
You know, there's just so many compelling cases for both players. It's almost 50-50 if you really want to get down to it.
I can't think, maybe Adrian Peterson, but other than that, I can't think of any other player that's really been the most valuable player that we would give the award to. I think it's really going to come down Tom Brady, Cam Newton.
No, that brings up a good point. It's called the most valuable player, not the person with the most stats, or whoever throws the most touchdowns or the most yards. It's who has the most value to your team. You take away this player from your team, how does this team fare with an average player at that position? Are the Panthers still 10-0 with Derek Anderson at quarterback?
Oh, absolutely not. But as bad as the Panthers would be without Cam Newton, I think that the Patriots would be a lot worse without Tom Brady. And we're going to see a huge drop-off in Patriots' quality of play when Tom Brady makes his way out. And so I think in that respect, I would still give the edge to Tom Brady because they're both very valuable to their teams. But I think that even without Cam Newton, the Panthers have just a little bit more firepower than would the Patriots.
Panthers, Patriots 10-0. I'd love to see a 16-0, 18-0 Super Bowl matchup between both teams. That'd be just absolutely crazy history.
Unprecedented, ridiculous, and I think quite possible at this point because they're just obliterating their opponents, with the exception of the Patriots-Bills game. But we can overlook that for the moment. These are the two best teams in the NFL. And like the last time we saw a team from the AFC and a team from the NFC go undefeated, go 10-0, was back in 2009 when the Colts and the Saints met in Super Bowl 44, and it's looking right now we could see a Panthers-Patriots Super Bowl rematch.
In the AFC, there's not really a team that I would say even is close to the Patriots. Broncos, maybe if Peyton Manning, I don't know.
I don't think. Really, right now, Brock Osweiler gives them their best chance to win, and even then, I don't think they're as good as the Patriots are.
Bengals, nah.
Andy Dalton doesn't. I don't. It's based on how Andy Dalton plays in the playoffs, and we know what to expect from a playoff Andy Dalton, and so I have trouble putting any faith into the Bengals right now with Andy Dalton not playing as well as he has.
But in the NFC, I see a little more challenge because you got Cardinals, Packers, Vikings. And even if the Seahawks can find their identity late into the season, they could be a potential upset because they'll probably be the wild card. I don't see them catching up to the Cardinals. They'll be a wild card team, and they'll have to travel for all three of their games if they make it that far. And they won't have the home field advantage that they've had the past couple seasons, so that could be a deal breaker in whether or not they go to the Super Bowl.
They can still be a dangerous team, though, because it's not as if the Falcons have locked up the 6th seed. They're struggling a lot, and it looks like the Seahawks may be back on their way up, and so they could end up being that 6th seed, and it would be really interesting to see if they ended up playing like the Vikings or the Packers in that first game. That would be a really great matchup between either of those teams and the Seahawks.
NFC playoff race is wide open. I mean, probably the loser of the NFC North is going to take one spot. And then so many other teams that could take that last spot. Buccaneers, they've been playing hot of lately. Seahawks, 5-5. Falcons, 6-4. So many good teams that could take that last playoff spot. And that last playoff spot, they would have to travel to Arizona or to Green Bay or Minnesota, all three of which are really, really tough matchups.
This year the league is a little top-heavy, and so really the only teams that I can see right now winning the Super Bowl are the Panthers, the Cardinals, and the Patriots, and that's about it. I don't have any faith in any of the other teams, not the Bengals, not the Broncos. I just haven't seen enough from any of those teams to tell me that they're going to be able to get it done in the playoffs and win the Super Bowl.
I told you we were going to talk about the refs. Now it's time to talk about the refs. What happened on that Buffalo Bills New England Patriots Monday night game? Did they forget they were reffing NFL football and not college football? He touched the ground and fell backwards. The clock should have stopped. The Bills should have gotten a chance to even a Hail Mary. It probably wouldn't have changed anything, but it would have given them a shot to say for them to say we got cheated. Sending a letter of apology every week just doesn't do anything.
I feel like every single week we're sitting here talking about how the NFL refs have blown yet another close game with their terrible officiating. And they send out the apology wagon. They send out the fruit basket and the little card that says, better luck next year, better luck next week. And, something needs to change. We can sit around and talk about how bad the refs are, but honestly, what are you going to do? I mean, it's 50-year-olds trying to referee games played by the best athletes in the world. And, get younger refs? Still you're going to get errors. And so I've said this before, any refereeing system that involves any human element is going to be prone to error. And I think that's what we're seeing. We can say they need to fix it, but it's hard to pin down exactly what they need to fix.
You know, Mike and Mike in the Morning, I've watched it a lot this week. Michael Smith and Jamel Hill were on Mike and Mike. You know, Michael Smith, you know, talking about the Patriots center, had a bad game, got pulled. You know, why can't they do the same thing with the NFL officials? You know, you make a bad call, you have another official lined up, ready to take your spot. Like, you made a bad call, you're coming out.
That makes sense. That's not going to fix any of the problems because, I mean, obviously the last play of the game, if a referee makes a bad call, I mean, you're not going to be able to put in a new ref because the game's over. But it'd be a start. That's going to be talked about a lot this year at, like, the NFL winter meetings and stuff like that. The spring meetings, you know, we're going to get the owners together. They're going to talk about what do we need to fix when it comes to what is the catch or not, you know, how these referees are going to keep up with these athletes. That's going to be a really hot topic this offseason.
You know, I don't even know what to say about the refs. They're just so bad. Sending a letter of apology every week. Does that make you feel good or does that make you feel bad as a fan?
It makes you feel terrible because you feel like you need to be coddled because you're getting a hug, but what you wanted instead was a legitimate chance to win the game, which you feel like you got cheated out of, which for pretty much all of the complaints we've heard about the refs this year aren't just, oh, the refs, they favored the other team or they didn't like our team or something like that. They're legitimate complaints about obvious officiating errors and mistakes.
I think they send those letters out to make you feel good, but they just make you feel worse. Like, we screwed your team. Here's a letter. This is supposed to make it all better.
Well, the NFL, at least it gives them the ability to say, well, at least we understand, we acknowledge the mistake, but that doesn't fix anything. So I don't see why they even sent out the letters in the first place. I guess it's just so the NFL doesn't look as bad, because that's what they're interested in.
I don't really know what to say anymore about the refs. You know, Peyton Manning, Brock Osweiler. Peyton Manning is looking to come down on his career, is looking to spiral down now. And this looks like it could be his last year. You know, as Gary Kubiak, how do you handle the Peyton Manning, Brock Osweiler situation?
The NFL is a what have you done for me lately league. And Peyton Manning hasn't done a lot for the Broncos lately. And I think Peyton Manning as a competitor will understand that the Broncos have to go with whoever gives them the best chance to win. He might still feel like he gives them the best chance to win, but that's not necessarily how it's panned out on the field. And, you know, with the way Brock Osweiler played against the Bears Sunday, beating them 17-15, he played just well enough for them to be able to make the excuse about them starting him over Peyton Manning. I mean, Peyton Manning is injured. His foot is hurt right now. But when his foot heals, it's going to be interesting to see how the Broncos handle that situation.
You know, I just said this might be Peyton Manning's last season, and it probably should be.
I think it definitely is.
You know, but the playoffs are coming up here kind of rapidly, actually. And we all know how Peyton Manning is in the playoffs. You know, do you leave in Brock Osweiler all season and just let Peyton Manning ride the rest of the season on the bench in what could be his last season? You don't like to see an NFL great go down in the bench on his last season. But that's looking like what's going to happen here.
Well, you see, that's the $64,000 question right there. I think that what they need to do is when Peyton Manning gets healthy, give him one more chance to show you as the Broncos what he can do. If he plays well enough, then you might be able to justify, you know, playing him for his last season. Because remember, like John Elway, he wants to be like John Elway, who won a Super Bowl in his last season. But that doesn't look like that's what's going to happen in Denver, because I haven't seen any reason to think that Peyton Manning should be started over Brock Osweiler.
You know, Brock Osweiler is the future of Denver, so why not? You know, it's like the whole Johnny Manziel situation, except Johnny Manziel is a lot worse of a person than Brock Osweiler. You know, Brock Osweiler, he's going to be the future, so you might as well put him in, see what he does. You got your older quarterback battling a foot injury, so you might as well put him in, see what he does, and If he doesn't do good, you move on, find a different quarterback. Brock Osweiler's been under Peyton Manning for quite some time now and never has gotten his chance to play. I remember watching a game when the Broncos were up by like a lot, and Brock Osweiler was getting all happy because he was going to come in, and then Peyton Manning went in anyways.
Still the highlight of Brock Osweiler's career. He went over, grabbed his helmet. The look on his face was priceless.
But he's the future, so you might as well leave him in. The Broncos, you don't want to say lock for the playoffs, but they're 8-2 right now, and just win 2 or 3 more games, and they're in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So rest Peyton Manning for the playoffs if you can. See what Brock Osweiler does, and have him ready for next season because he'll have a lot of NFL snaps.
It's a thorny situation. You hate to see Peyton Manning playing this bad, but you can't afford to throw Peyton Manning out there in the wild card game or in the divisional game and have him start the game off 5 for 20, 35 yards, 4 interceptions, put you in a hole like he did against the Chiefs. And you never know if that's going to happen because there's a lot of uncertainty right now with Peyton Manning.
I think Peyton Manning should make the final debut at home. That should be one of his starting points, and then the playoffs.
All right. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. We got a great Thanksgiving lineup. We got Eagles, Lions, Panthers, Cowboys, Bears, Packers, and I think that's just going to be some great football games to watch, especially Panthers, Cowboys. I know that's something you would want to talk about because for some reason the Cowboys the line is even right now. Actually, nope, Dallas favored by 1.5 points. What do you have to say about that, Mason, as a Panthers fan?
As a Panthers fan, I don't even know what to say. Tony Romo is back, but the Dallas Cowboys are 3-7. The Panthers are 10-0. Why are they the underdog? It just makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. I don't even know because Panthers are 10-0 for a reason. They've won every game, and in most of the games, they've blown out the teams that they've played. There really hasn't been a close game. Maybe the Colts game, Packers game. But other than that, they've blown out teams. The Cowboys just suck.
And the Panthers, they've made a living this year off of blowing out bad teams like the Cowboys. And so I don't see any reason why the Cowboys should be favored. Just want to say Bears Packers, they've met like some 80-something times in their history, probably more. This is the first time we're going to get to see them play each other on Thanksgiving. Jay Cutler, you never know what he's going to do. The Packers, they're coming off of not a dominant win, but at least a win that got them back into first place in the NFC North. And these are two teams that could really use this game to kickstart their season again.
If you bet, you have to take all your money for Thanksgiving Day games and go put it on the Panthers right now. Like, they're the underdog at 10-0. That makes absolutely no sense to me. I have no idea.
And then the final Thanksgiving game, well, I guess the first one, but the final one we'll talk about, Eagles-Lions. That seems like an unfortunate game to put on Thanksgiving. I mean, it's Thanksgiving, so you have to put the Lions on. But, they could have at least put them against a decent team that's fun to watch instead of the Eagles. I think the Lions are going to win this one handily. But, the Eagles, they're not nobody wants to watch the Eagles, especially not when you're just getting ready. The Thanksgiving meal is getting cooked, and you don't know what to do. So you go downstairs and you turn on the TV and you think, oh, great, football's on. But then you see that the Lions are up 12-3 against the Eagles midway through the third quarter. And, that's not going to make anybody excited.
That's, like you said, that's the point where your Thanksgiving meal is cooking. And most NFL fans will probably fall asleep and burn their turkey watching that game.
That's just an unfortunate Thanksgiving matchup right there.
But the Eagles this season, as Nate projected earlier first week, the Eagles were supposed to do good. Like, they could have been a Super Bowl contender, and then they just kind of went down the toilet. So this game didn't look too bad on paper once the season started, but now it just looks awful.
Yeah. Well, the Eagles, they come into every year with a whole lot of hype. I remember, I think it was maybe 4 years ago when they had Michael Vick. They brought in Nnamdi Asomugha. it was like the Eagles' dream team. And then they go 8-8 and miss the playoffs. And that looks like that's what's going to happen this year. I mean, it was supposed to be, all right, we bring in DeMarco Murray. We make the trade for Sam Bradford. And there's a lot of optimism, a lot of hype going into the season. Chip Kelly got their fast offense running a play every 25 seconds, and it's still not working.
You know, I think that brings up right around an hour on our show. Is there anything?
Congratulations to Indianapolis Colts beating another team with a winning record. Adam Vinatieri, absolutely automatic. Whenever he steps up to kick, you know what's going to happen, especially in the last 2 minutes. And he's just a great kicker. And Matt Hasselbeck, he threw 2 interceptions, but you got the job done, buddy. And DeQuell Jackson, thank you for not dropping that interception.
You know, great NFL season so far. Our fantasy playoffs are starting to come up here soon. I'm 8-3. What are you?
6-4-1, and right now I'm fifth, and Tyler is actually sixth at 5-6. So if I can win one more game, I'm a lock for the playoff.
You know, that is the end of our show. Thank you for joining us on this week's edition of the Rational Fans Podcast.
Happy